The dumbest thing Legna's school ever banned was bringing in outside food. One day, he decided to buy lunch from the Wendy's across the street from his school, since the lunch choices on that particular day looked awful. Legna brought his lunch back to school to avoid arousing suspicion. When he sat down to eat in the cafeteria, he opened up the Wendy's bag and started eating. All of a sudden, one of the cafeteria monitors came up to him and said to give him the food he was eating. Legna said,
"No, I paid good money for it."
They asked him again and said that if he refused, they would throw it away. Once again, Legna refused and packed up his food, walked to the cafeteria, and flipped the monitor the bird. One time, Legna and his friends went to a bar where they drank some whiskey. He had 5 and was pretty hammered, so he went to the transgender bathroom to take a whiz. He went inside and saw someone who looked like a woman, so he slapped her ass. It turned out to be a guy, who immediately maced him. Legna ran out of the bathroom and went into another, where he used a urinal. The problem was, he had run into the women's bathroom. He was so drunk that he was pissing in the sink, thinking it was a urinal. A woman saw him and slapped him. Legna fought back, thinking the woman was a man. He tackled her, but then security was called. Before leaving, Legna was let off with a warning. When I was in grade 5, I got my period for the first time, and my mom decided to call everyone in our family and tell them. Because this was a day for celebration, she said. This was a day when I became a woman, she said. This was a day that all women go through. Yes, but not all women need to know about it, Mom. I refused to have this party, but of course that didn't stop her. She threw me one with friends and family, with decorations colored in red and white. Yeah, I was kind of mortified, but I know she was coming from a good place. I'm kind of glad it was just my family and not my friends.
One day, Kyle was buying groceries. He was in line at the checkout when the bratty kid ahead of the line started showing off. The kid squirmed right out of his mother's grasp and jumped onto the checkout conveyor belt. Little shit thought this was hilarious and started walking on all the food. He went straight up to the cashier's face and did a loud fart. His mother was just too stunned to move. The kid knew he was in trouble and tried to run away down the conveyor belt. He ended up slipping over and falling all over everyone's groceries. He was laughing the whole time. Kyle thought it was pretty funny, but it basically convinced him to never ever have kids.
Gergak went to school feeling really confident because he was going to ask his crush out. At lunch, he sat next to her and asked her the question, but she turned around and screamed, "What the fuck? No!" Then she slapped Gergak across the face 10 times. A year later, she kissed a guy right in front of him and then slapped Gergak again saying, "I don't love you, you cunt!" He still doesn't know what that was all about.
One time when she was 17, Spincess was eating at a restaurant with her mom and infant son. After her mom left to use the bathroom, Spincess decided to breastfeed her son. While she breastfed him, a creepy-looking man in his 30s walked up to her. He leaned close to her ear and asked, "Does that taste good?" "I bet it does." Spincess looked at him and noticed that he was looking down at her nursing son. Not knowing what to do, she kicked him in the nuts. He fell to the floor, making the servers come over to ask what had happened. After Spincess told them, they called the police, who came and arrested the man. It turned out that the man was a registered sex offender.
Gooby's weirdest secret is that sometimes when she came home from middle school, she would collect all her stuffed animals and reenact the best scenes that happened at school that day. Eventually she grew out of playing with her toys, but most of her childhood memories still include Marshmallow, Brownie, Starburst, Rainbow, and the rest of her stuffed toy gang. Man, life before the internet must have been tough. Emoji was eating Chinese food at the mall when his friend decided he would give him $5 if he snorted wasabi. With Emoji being his 12-year-old self, he would do nearly anything for money, so of course, he accepted. Emoji took a glob of wasabi paste, put it in a line on the table, and proceeded to snort it in the middle of the food court. It hurt so much, but what Emoji thought hurt the most was that he was dumb enough to not ask to see the money first, and was disappointed to have found that his friend didn't even have $5.
When she was 11, Spincess loved writing fan fiction as well as normal stories. One day, her dad read one of her normal stories and liked it so much he wanted to show it to her teacher. On the night of parent-teacher conferences, Spincess went to her bedroom and grabbed her book with her story so her dad could show her teacher. After he left for the conferences, she went back to her bedroom to work on some more fan fiction, which she wanted to keep secret because it was very violent. However, the book of writing she found had the story her dad wanted to show to the teacher. That's when Spincis noticed that her teacher was about to read an extremely violent piece of fanfiction. Her heart began to race, and she didn't know what to do. At school the next day, her teacher glared at her a lot. She also ended up getting in trouble with her dad. As a result, she stopped writing fanfiction.
In 7th grade, Ramona's science teacher was the biggest pervert she ever knew. He looked down the bras of every girl in the school, was caught watching porn when he was supposed to be teaching, and once even suggested strip searching a girl who supposedly had a pepper spray keychain for people just like him. The worst thing that she remembers was when her female friend went on one of the school-sponsored backpacking trips that he happened to be chaperoning. The boys and girls both bathed in the creek that was there. The only problem was that he, being the main chaperone, had to stay with the kids while they bathed to make sure they weren't having sex. Ramona's friend happened to have some of the biggest breasts in the school, and so she was one that he picked on. He snuck up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, grabbing each one of her boobs, and telling her to take off the sports bra that she was wearing. The worst part was, he was never arrested or even fired. The few times people tried to report him, he got them suspended. James Shark was 17 when he was at his girlfriend's house playing a game. His girlfriend's mother walked in and asked them to go out and get a fish using their bare hands. If they did, she would give them $300. So they went out into the lake and managed to catch a couple of medium-sized fish. However, his girlfriend's mom told him to throw them back because she wanted a bigger fish. James Shark decided to swim out deeper where he saw a bigger fish. When he went to grab it, the fish jumped out of the water and broke his arm. Luckily, he had a pocket knife, which he used to slash its side. He picked it up and carried it back with a broken arm. James Shark ended up getting double the money. He thought of it as a good day, even though he had to go to the hospital.
In 2nd grade, Nixiom had a strange theory about static shocks. He thought that if you touched someone and they shocked you, it meant that they had a secret crush on you. He figured a shock was just love energy passing from person to person. One day, Nixiom's best friend passed by him and gave him a little shock of static electricity. Nixiom freaked out, thinking his friend had secret feelings for him. He spent half of recess carefully explaining to him that he just wanted to remain friends. His friend was obviously confused and had to explain to Nixiom that that was not how static shocks worked. Andy was at a horseshoe tournament with her parents, and they decided to bring her older brother along. Well, her brother got a hold of some Bud Light and had drank like 7 cans before her dad had told him to slow down a bit. Needless to say, he didn't, and after a few more cans of beer, he walked up to Andy, called her by his girlfriend's name, and tried to kiss her. So after she pushed him away and told him to back off, he literally went to the side of the house and puked everywhere and passed out on the ground.
When Dolan was 9 years old, he and his father decided to go to McDonald's. As soon as they sat down with their food, a guy walked in, who was obviously drunk and got completely naked. He started screaming at no one in particular, "I'd like some nuggets, please!" In the middle of the restaurant, Dolan and his dad sat in silence. They were completely shocked. The drunk man came up to where they were sitting and stood up on the table, completely naked, and started screaming again. The employees had to tackle him down and drag him out of the restaurant. It definitely put Dolan off McDonald's for a while.
When Emoji was shopping with her mum at Ross one time, she saw a guy yelling at some lady. It was a store manager yelling at a cashier. Emoji was nosy, so she got closer and listened. The manager asked the lady why she didn't come to work for 2 whole weeks. It sounded like the woman replied, "Because my boob was sick." Emoji isn't sure whether she said boob or boo, like a boyfriend. Either way, the manager fired her right there and then. Emoji's mum heard the conversation too. She was laughing like a maniac.
A really bad habit that Spinal Palm's whole family knows about is that he sometimes eats his own scabs, old and new ones. He eats them all the time. When he's bored in school, he'll check his legs, arms, back, face, almost every part of his body. It started when he was in the 1st grade, and that's when he started doing it to the point where his family made fun of him. He'll sometimes pick one that bleeds too much, though he doesn't do that as much anymore.
Ghost Toast once received a pretty baffling piece of advice. He was told by his college teacher, "You can lead a horse to water,
but if you can't teach it the backstroke, you haven't accomplished anything. I mean, that's pretty much nonsense. Seen horses drinking water, they even paddle in it. But you're setting the bar pretty high if you think you can be the first person in history of the earth to teach a horse to swim on its back. I feel like the moral of the story is aim so high that you will never be able to reach your dreams and live in a constant state of shame and disappointment.
Every Christmas, Legna's family hosts a gigantic Christmas parties at a gigantic church, and they usually hand out presents and hot food. Sometimes Legna and the other kids would play hide and seek, going up as far as 2 stories. Above there is a dark mansion-like room that no one uses. They used to hear growling and gagging noises from there. One night, Legna and his friends Lady Bot and Tullip had the nerve to hide up there, and it was fine at first. It was dark, but nothing happened for the first 5 minutes, until they heard a little growl and some tapping. Legna said quietly,
What the hell was that?
His friends were too scared to move. They knew they weren't alone, and whoever that was out there was not friendly. Then they heard their full names being called. They didn't move, and Tullip said,
I don't want to die.
Then they heard loud pawing at the door, and to their horror, they saw an awful-looking figure. They screamed and then ran out of there before hearing the window break. They ran down 2 flights of stairs before seeing their parents and passing out. Later, when they told someone, the person said that a depressed man had hung himself at that window in 1901. Melissa and her sister had a weird babysitter when she was 6. One night, her baby sister was being put to bed. However, she was having a hard time falling asleep. Melissa and her 3-year-old sister were picking on each other while their 9-year-old sister was flirting with the babysitter. So we set up some chairs in a circle with the backs inwards, sat Melissa and her 2 sisters in them, tied them up, and told them to listen while he serenaded their little sister. The song started off with the line, go to sleep, little goober. Melissa and her sisters were laughing hard, which made their little sister laugh too. Their babysitter continued singing, your siblings are annoying. I wonder if your mom has duct tape. Melissa and her sisters continued to laugh, but oddly enough, their little sister fell asleep. He untied them and said that he was surprised the song actually worked.
I love the train. I reckon you can get a story out of pretty much any train ride. I've seen people get mugged, I've seen people taking drugs, filling each other up, I've seen all sorts of ridiculous things. Just this week, I saw someone talking about how, because it was a nice day outside, it was probably Guan Yin, the goddess of mercy, smiling down on us, telling us our day would be good. Trains are ridiculous, they are the best. One time, Honeybits tried to get away with going on a field trip without a permission slip. On a particular day, when her teacher said that slips were due, Honeybits didn't have hers. So she grabbed a pen and wrote her mum's name on the signature line. To her surprise, it worked on the teacher, but not on the bus driver, who was her mum. Honeybits was still able to go on the field trip, though her mum said to her from the driver's seat, I didn't know you'd be here. Have fun on the trip.
Well, she didn't actually do anything, but when Melissa was still in school, she was called into the principal's office and asked, what have you done? She just sat there completely confused. What were you doing with your laptop in the gym? Melissa told the principal that whatever it was, she was completely innocent. Her laptop was in the shop at the time. Eventually, he realized that he had the wrong person and apologized profusely. Later on, her friend from the student council came up to her and asked how bad it was. She pointed out that the principal was wrong, and her friend said, oh, he must have assumed it was you because you're so good at computers. It didn't sound like you to sell porn to the young kids.
4 years ago, Melissa had a terrible argument with her fiance. It was so bad that she didn't feel like going into work that night. After storming out of the house, Melissa thought of a lie to tell her boss. When she called the restaurant she worked at, one of her coworkers, Doopy, picked up.
Thank you for calling.
Doopy began, but Melissa cut her off, screaming and crying.
Doopy!
Cried Melissa.
I was walking to work when this guy asked if I needed a ride. I said yes because I didn't want to walk 8 miles, and he tried to kidnap me. He took the wrong turn, and he kept going after I asked him what he was doing. I jumped out of the car at a stop sign, and I'm now hiding in the woods.
Doopy freaked out and offered to pick her up, but Melissa told her that she didn't know where she was and didn't want to get the cops involved. That was when Doopy began to doubt her story. Just then, the restaurant's general manager, Derek, came on the line and calmly said,
Melissa, you didn't get kidnapped.
Melissa said,
Yes, I did, Derek.
No, you didn't. Now, quit screwing around and get your ass to work.
He said. Aggravated that no one believed her, Melissa went back to her house and asked her fiancé to give her a ride to work. She arrived at work an hour later, embarrassed that she had taken that lie too far just to get out of working. The next day, she came clean about it. Doopy and Derek knew she had been lying, and Melissa apologized for her actions. They forgave her and were happy that she told them the truth. To this day, Doopy, Derek, and Melissa still joke about the whole kidnapping incident.
Dolan had a girl in his class in middle school that he always had the biggest crush on. Now, Dolan took advice from the Internet Daily. He heard from a voting site that complimenting a girl's bust was the best way to wrap them around his finger, so one day, Dolan caught his crush right before English class, gathered all of his courage and said,
"Nice boobs. It makes you way more beautiful than you are."
Dolan's hopes were dashed with a slap in reply. At the Healy main campus of Ohio University, Doopy carried a couple bags to the bus stop. She was going to her grandfather's place for the weekend right before summer break. Of course, the bus stop was on the other side of campus and there was no easy way to get to it except to go over the massive hill. Doopy got about 20% of the way up the hill and she started feeling dizzy, was sweating and had trouble breathing. Heat stroke was hitting her hard and as a result she blacked out. When she woke up, Doopy found herself lying face down on the pavement. Thankfully, Doopy had landed on one of her bags, so she didn't injure her face too badly. As she lay there, sprawled out on the bricks, dizzy and disoriented, people walked up and down the hill. Some glanced over at the injured and sick Doopy, while a couple pointed and laughed. Nobody came over to see if she was alright, if she needed help, or even if she was alive or dead. Doopy managed to sit up, get her bottle of water from her bag, and chug it. It was her sheer stubbornness that kept her conscious long enough to save her life. She got back on her feet and stumbled into the library, where she sat down and cooled off for a while before continuing to the bus stop. That was a day Doopy hated people, and her feelings haven't got any better since.
Ladybot went to an event where all the clubs advertised themselves for new members. There was an LGBT club and Ladybot was interested in joining. She went up to the booth and wanted to make an impression, so instead of just shaking their hand, she shook their hand and yelled,
"Hey, I'm Ladybot. You gay piece of retard llama."
The person smiled politely as their eyes went wide with fear. Ladybot realized right then that it was just a bit too random. She just quickly signed her name and email and walked quietly to the next booth. To be fair, that does sound like something Ladybot would say, so. Nixium was in an elevator to go to his father's office when the elevator stopped suddenly. Awkwardly, there was just one other guy in the elevator and the silence was heavy. Nixium felt like he had to strike up a conversation with the guy, but couldn't decide on what to say. So his brain mashed everything together and said,
It's nice to be stuck in an elevator, like you.
The man just looked at him and awkwardly said, okay. Luckily, the elevator started to move shortly after that, and Nixium could not get out of the door fast enough. When he was 2 or 3 years old, Slapped Ham began sneaking into the bathroom in the middle of the night to chew on toilet paper. He had no idea why he felt compelled to suck on the soft white sheets every night, and one night his brother busted him and he was mortified. He yelled, "Oh, I'm related to a toilet paper eating weirdo." Quickest excuse he could think of was he pretended that he was a werewolf and he needed to chew toilet paper instead of killing people. His brother obviously didn't fall for it, and every now and then Slapped Ham will still suck on a square or two.
When Ladybot was in middle school, she was dating the cutest boy in her grade. He was really sweet and would give her gifts and compliments all the time. One day, he got down on one knee, pulled out a plastic ring, and asked Ladybot if she would marry him. Just as Ladybot was about to answer, he shouted, "Psych!" and threw the ring across the playground. He then told her he was sick of being her boyfriend and was officially breaking up with her. Ladybot was so mad that she kicked him in the stomach in front of a huge crowd of people. After that, they never said another word to each other.
Salty Squid used to live near a high school when he was younger, so he always saw teens doing dumb shit. One time, he saw a boy running down a sidewalk with duct tape wrapped around his body, with his arms taped to his sides. He was being chased by what he assumed were the boy's friends, because he was smiling and didn't appear to be in any trouble. Salty Squid didn't have a clue what was going on, though now he's very happy that he no longer lives there.
When Melissa was in the 4th grade and her sister in the 7th, they had this babysitter who really liked to slack off when their parents were not in the house. She didn't do her chores, and she would force Melissa and her sister to do her chores for her. If they refused, she would get a plate and break it, and then call her parents and tell them that they broke it. Later that night, they were scolded for breaking a plate.
A day later, the babysitter came to their house early and said, "Good morning," with a smile towards their parents. After they left, she started slacking off again, and Melissa and her sister did her chores. This went on for a year until the babysitter got fired after the parents saw her dirty habits.
One time, Doopie's class took a school trip to the museum. On the way home, a creepy boy came and sat next to Doopie at the back of the bus. Without saying anything, he reached over and grabbed Doopie's breast. Doopie screamed and said,
Why the hell would you do that?
The creepy boy just shrugged and said, I don't know, I felt lonely. He went to do it again, but Doopie punched him right in the nose. It was definitely an eventful trip to the museum.
One day during her lunch period, Spences and a few of her guy friends sat at a table to talk. There was one other guy there, and none of them really knew who he was. He just kind of awkwardly inserted himself into the conversation. While they were talking to this guy who already seemed like a very odd character, the subject of milking animals came up. As the conversation progressed, the odd kid looked at Spences and said,
You're the only one at this table who can actually milk yourself.
It may not sound that bad. Wait, really? Is that what this person wrote? Well, that's what they say. I think different. But for Spences and her guy friends, it was incredibly uncomfortable.
What's my most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me? Well, I have quite a few of those. But just to pick one that sticks out in my head, when I was in primary school, there was this one girl who was nice to me. Now, back then, you know, girls and boys just did not mix. It's like they're some foreign species from some different planet over yonder, and so you just don't talk to them. This one girl was nice to me, and so immediately I thought, oh, that means she's in love with me. That means we're gonna get married and all that. So me, with my very juvenile mind, I started going around my friends and saying, oh yeah, that girl, yeah, she's my girlfriend. And they're like, oh really? That's crazy, that's cool. And it started to spread around the school a little bit. Now you can see where this is going. So one of the girl's friends came up and was like, is it true that you said that you're this person's boyfriend? I was like, yep, yeah, that's true. We were going out and all that. And so they vanished. They're like, okay. They vanished. And then the most embarrassing time, I got confronted in front of a lot of people by the girl. She was like, why are you telling people that we're in love and that we're going out? What are you talking about? Like, I really said like 3 things to you. I was like, oh, no. I thought that's how love works. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Yeah, it was not good. It was not good. I still cringe thinking about it. And after that, I learned, oh, okay, love doesn't work that way. Yeah, I've learned my lesson since.
One day, Sidious and his friend were really bored, so he had the idea of exploring the sewer tunnel that was down at his house. As they left his friend's house, it was cloudy, but they thought nothing of it. While they were exploring the sewer, they heard loud howling noises behind them, and from the distance, they could see the entrance consumed by darkness. After that, Sidious realized it was flooding water headed straight for them. They ran for their lives, praying they'd make it. They turned right at a crossing point, which led to a ladder that went outside. Luckily, they made it out, and as they did, it was sprinkling. With that much water in the sewer, you'd think it would have been pouring.